Source: Uncle from Another World. Welcome back to AniRecapz. Like and subscribe so you never miss our quality uploads. During the fall of 2017, Takafumi learned that his uncle, who had been in a coma after getting involved in a traffic accident 17 years ago, had woken up, and so he goes to meet him. Upon arriving, his uncle starts talking to him weirdly, which prompts him to think that his uncle is suffering mental damage, which only solidifies after his uncle claims that he was excited to return from the Another World Grand Bahamol after 17 years. When Uncle asks our boy about what the other family members are doing, he learns that the whole family is separated. Even his sister didn't want to do anything with him, which prompted Uncle to write down something in a small notebook and chant Ikura's Kora after that. Uncle tries to prove to Takafumi that he went to another world by using magic, which initially fails, much to Takafumi's dismay. MC then tries to explain his financial issues and inability to support him when suddenly Uncle triggers a wind magic while using Japanese, proving his claims. Seeing this, Takafumi gets excited and forgets about his talk about not being able to support his uncle. He then asks MC about the console wars and the situation about Sega. He becomes distraught when he learns that Sega had pulled out from the console market, so he immediately writes down on his small notebook and chant Ikura's Kora after that. Takafumi gets interested and asks what Ikura's Kora is, and Uncle reveals to him that it's the memory erasure spell, which he uses whenever he experiences something unbearable. However, he writes it down in his small notebook before erasing it. Takafumi gets interested and asks if he could read the notebook, which he immediately regrets after reading, and asks his uncle to use Ikura's Kora on him. A week later, Uncle gets discharged and moves to live with Takafumi in his apartment. Meanwhile, Takafumi decided to monetize his uncle's powers and started posting videos of it on YouTube, which helped to generate 60,000 yen in ad revenue. Later, Uncle questions Takafumi on why he got such a big room to live alone, to which he replies that he was initially a room share setup, but because of issues, it didn't work out. Uncle is surprised to hear the term room share, which he never knew, and thinks that Takafumi was living with a girl. Takafumi clarifies it and is surprised to learn that room share didn't exist 17 years ago, while comparing a smartphone to an electronic dictionary, to Takafumi's surprise. With the talk buddies going on, Takafumi asks Uncle about his companions in the Another World, to which Uncle informs him that he was mostly solo for 17 years. The primary reason is that everyone in that Another World was beautiful, while he was hunted down as a subspecies of orc. Uncle talks about one particular person who followed him around regularly and harassed him and would launch attacks and verbal abuse towards him. Takafumi is sad to hear that another fantasy worlds aren't that good either. Uncle continues to say more about that person, on how the first time he saved her, rather than saying thanks, she was pretty rude to him. As Uncle continues to talk more about the person, MC realizes that the girl was at tsundere and remembers that its concept didn't originate until 4 years after Uncle departed for his journey. Uncle laminates that things didn't go well for him in the Another World and shifts his focus to interact with his commanders from around the world on internet, but is unable to keep up with the terms and things going on. One day, Uncle shows interest in buying a turn model cell phone from an auction. Takafumi says that it won't be used under modern standards since it uses an old 2G signal, but Uncle isn't worried as he won't be using it anyway, as there is no one to call to. While Uncle is surprised by the amount of stuff a smartphone can do, he laments about their lack of gimmick. Uncle then notes that 17 years has changed a lot of things and developed innovations. He then mentioned how he once innovated an item in the other world and showed his memory about the incident using the spell Ikura's Elran. He had crafted an ever-brimming pot of water using spell cards for a village suffering from a drought. Takafumi is impressed by the news and compares it to the overpowered modern science trope. He thinks the villagers must have some praises and gratitude for Uncle. But in reality, the villagers had tried to hang Uncle because the shape of the item was sacrilegious and they smashed it. And while the villagers were trying to turn Uncle, Elf arrives to stop them. While Elf was trying to mediate the situation, Uncle took the chance to escape. Takafumi becomes frustrated with the case, though Uncle misinterprets it as Takafumi doesn't like the first-person view of the incident. So Uncle turns the point of view in his memory and shows Takafumi how he was treated. Takafumi asks Uncle if it's possible to see what happened with the elf, to which Uncle focuses on the background and sees the elf being a bit disappointed that Uncle had run away. She starts fighting the villagers who attacked her. Suddenly, Uncle gets a notification of the auction on the cell phone closing down soon and in a hurry orders, without checking the shipping cost, which turns out to be 2,000 yen for the item, since someone from an isolated island was selling it. Takafumi laments that if the location was closer, they could have picked it up personally to save the shipping cost and considered the incident a lesson. To Takafumi's surprise, Uncle suddenly jumps out of the window and flies away, returning from his trip 30 minutes later with the cell phone in hand. He shows it off to Takafumi, who asks Uncle whether he could pick up a similarly auctioned item, to which Uncle agrees. Takafumi receives a package of rice delivered by Amazon and asks Uncle to hand him something to cut the box. Uncle gives him a short sword which surprises him. He urges Uncle where it suddenly appeared. Uncle then shows him his storage magic, which is withdrawing his small notebook from it. Takafumi asks if Uncle had brought more stuff from the other world, to which he tries to take out a magic sword and accidentally hits the wall, much to Takafumi's dismay. Uncle next takes out a ring with a magically crystallized mermaid's tear, which is mounted on a ring carved from rainbow coral, which is rare enough to sell for enough to allow a person to create a castle with its money. Listening to this, Takafumi wanted to sell the ring, but Uncle informed him that he had already tried to sell, and it was priced at 50 yen because the materials used in the ring were so rare no one knew what it was, so it was treated as a children's toy. Uncle starts thinking about ways to boost his view count by using new inspiration. Takafumi asks whether Uncle wanted to give the ring to someone as he was carrying it around, to which Uncle says that it was item drop. He got after clearing a hard dungeon. Seeing Takafumi down afterward, Uncle asks whether he wants to talk about love and shares the story of his first love, Sonic and Tails. Uncle is reminiscent of visiting the toy store to admire them while viewing the title screen. Takafumi asks Uncle whether he had ever fallen in love with someone, to which he gets the answer of Uncle falling in love with a human game character. Takafumi asks if Uncle ever meets girls in the other world, to which Uncle agrees and shows him his memory of saving a girl and her siblings from an orc. While initially thankful, the girl eventually overcomes despair upon seeing Uncle and decides to sacrifice herself by giving herself up to Uncle to save her siblings' lives. Having misinterpreted the situation, Uncle thought that the girl was happy and thankful to him, but he suddenly blanks out and thinks that some goblin might have attacked him from behind, unknown to him, who threw him into the river. Takafumi notices in the memory that the girl's siblings were making suspicious moves while trying to get behind Uncle and considered the possibility that it wasn't a goblin attack, but rather the sibling attacking Uncle from behind. He later encounters with the lover elf girl. She seems to have saved him once again from a bad danger. She then starts acting all tsundere, saying those keywords, and when she asks him to return the favor by staying with her forever, this happens.
変な意味に取らないでよ。何？
世界に7つしかないと言われる。
何？
サイズは合うか？
待って。そんな急に。
いらないのか？おじさんがなんかとんでもないことしようとしてる！このディオだ!
Which he later takes out and sells for money, much to Elf's dismay. Takafumi admires the tenacity of the elf girl. On a rainy day, Takafumi narrates how the recent decline in views of his uncle's videos has his uncle vow to stop using online auctioning. He then reveals that he recently won a magazine that listed the result of the Sega Saturn Reader's Choice. Before being sent to the other world, he didn't have a chance to read it. Takafumi, however, doesn't care. The results are a surprise since a PC-ported Bisudo game wins the contest. After reading this, Uncle hovers outside in the pouring rain, gets struck by lightning, and proclaims that Guardian Heroes should have won it. He then goes on a tirade about the game's incredible quality and its placement in the game ranking list. Once the rain settles afterward, MC serves Uncle some coffee while consoling him that a Sega Saturn RPG placed in second. He then learns that Uncle didn't play RPGs due to his lousy memory surrounding the game mechanics. The mentioning of RPGs jogs Uncle's memory of a time that reminded him of an RPG encounter he had in the other world. Casting Akuras Elran, Uncle shows MC a memory of where he battled a village elder who called him an orc. After that, he learns that the legendary dragon of the fire shrine close to the village was roused. The way to defeat the dragon is with a special ice sword from the Ice Clan. However, the descendant of the clan is a rowdy roughneck named Mabel. Upon meeting with Mabel, she tells Uncle about a particular flower that her mother once showed her. Uncle then leaves, reaches the fire temple, and slews the dragon himself without needing the sword. This has MC note how his uncle should have retrieved the flowers for Mabel, but claims it'd be too hard for him to remember. After the rest of the memory is shown, the doorbell rings, and it's a package delivery containing a Sega Saturn and 20 games for it. It was intended to be a surprise for Uncle, but he is now hesitant to give it to him because of his recent outburst about the ranking and their tightened budget. Uncle gives off an astonished look, making Takafumi unable to comprehend whether or not he's happy or angry. So to cut the tension, MC reveals that he also has guardian heroes, and elated, Uncle asks if he wants to play. The two then play the game together. Walking home at night after a shopping trip, Uncle talks about how the city's atmosphere that night reminds him of a game called Alien Storm to Takafumi. It also reminds Uncle of New Year's Eve in the other world, piquing Takafumi's interest. At home, Uncle learns that his favorite series Kachikame has ended. Soon after, he casts Akira's spell to show MC his memory of New Year's Eve party. Although everyone was happy and having a wonderful time, Uncle was ostracized by them all and ate alone. He then returned to his room for the night, and the memory ended. Claiming that nothing else happened after that, Takafumi asks if the elf appeared, and he denies it. Apathetically, Takafumi asks Uncle if he wants to play some Sega Saturn together, and Uncle happily agrees. During their game session, Uncle reveals that Mabel did visit him that night, and Takafumi turns off the game system and demands that he see what happened during her visit. Once again, casting Akuras Elran, Uncle shows Takafumi his memory of Mabel, who had the ice sword on her person, asking him how to overcome being a coward. Learning that it was the village elder who told Mabel that, Uncle gives her a motivational speech, but it takes a drastic turn when he learns that she's a recluse and suggests she stay that way. The memory ends after Mabel offers her the ice sword, but he declines it. With that, Takafumi languidly gets up and asks if Uncle wants some soba noodles, and he accepts the offer. As they eat their soba noodles, Takafumi asks Uncle if he played video games in his teen years on New Year's Eve, but he answers that he watched a comedy show around that time called It's Okay to Laugh. Presently, the show has since ended, which shocks Uncle, and he learns that show ended 3 years prior and a year before the current Hoshikame ended. They continued their conversation throughout the night, discussing games and eating their soba until the new year rolled in. On New Year's Day, Uncle creepily compliments a woman named Fujimiya, who creeps her out. Takafumi then approaches her, revealing they have been friends since middle school. They briefly chat, and Takafumi invites Fujimiya over to his place, to which Fujimiya claims she'll come over after she drops off her groceries. 30 minutes later, Fujimiya arrives and receives a text from Takafumi about how he's out getting snacks, but will be home soon. Fujimiya enters the place, and shortly after, Uncle arrives. He then tries to erase her memory of what she saw, but Takafumi stops him and explains that she's his friend. Upon hearing this, Uncle prostrates himself to Fujimiya and thanks him for being Takafumi's friend. Afterward, Uncle and Takafumi explain to Fujimiya about Uncle's background and as a YouTuber. Fujimiya then proclaims that Uncle should leave Takafumi's life and live his own, and Uncle deduces that she loves Takafumi. Despite her denying it, Takafumi claims they're 100% friends, and that's it, but Uncle doesn't buy it, claiming he's seen the entire Neon Genesis Evangelion series. Although everyone back in the day watched it, he solely watched it because SEJ sponsored it. Takafumi then realizes that Uncle will realize that the elf was, in fact, in love with him. On the other hand, Uncle uses a couple of EVA characters as an example of Takafumi and Fujimiya's relationship. After Uncle moves Fujimiya to tears by telling her a story about a video game character, Uncle swiftly reads her mind and what she did before she arrived there. The doorbell rings, and as Uncle goes to answer it, Fujimiya demands to know who he is, but before he can answer, the package man calls for him. Fujimiya then suggests that Takafumi cut ties with Uncle, alluding to them becoming roommates, which she clarifies is not the case when Takafumi thinks that's what she means. As it turns out, the delivery was 15 kilos of rice, and the package man and Fujimiya were notably furious for different reasons. Currently, Uncle's secret is known by one more person. Takafumi returns home to find Sumika with the elf from his uncle's memories. 75 minutes earlier, Takafumi informs his uncle that Sumika will be arriving there later. Takafumi then reads an email addressed to his uncle, who couldn't read it because it was written in English. Hence, Takafumi uses a translation app to make it legible, and he then warns his uncle that he will be jobless soon. The cause of this is due to YouTube's newly imposed restrictions wanting users to have 1K subs and 4,000 hours of watch time from users. It's then revealed that the source of the low viewership and sub count is due to Uncle's reply comments. Uncle then confessed to Takafumi that he hadn't seen such a response from people since his time in the sealed city, Luveldram. It was at that time 1,000 monsters broke through a barrier surrounding the place. Dying to find out what happened, Takafumi is then shown the memory of when his uncle was in the city. In the memory, the elf clears up a misunderstanding that Uncle was an orc and later uses a Chinese idiom that Uncle clarifies was a translation error from the magic he was using. The memory continues as Elf talks about the barrier surrounding the town. Uncle casts a spell to destroy it, Outwim. An army of giant cyclops led by a cloud dragon then appears outside of the city, ready to invade the place. When Elf leaps into action, the barrier re-erects around the city, and she crashes into the reformed barrier. It turns out that Uncle asked the spirits to repair the broken barrier. Despite how Uncle was suspected of being the one who broke the barrier, Elf clears the situation upon her return. In return for not telling everyone there that he broke the barrier, the elf asks Uncle to take her to dinner that night. However, by that time, Uncle had fled on a wagon to avoid being extorted by her in the future. Recalling that he used to ask the spirits for help in the past, Uncle pleads on his YouTube page for people to subscribe there so he can save it. Initially, Takafumi is saddened by that as internet trolls prey on such weakness. However, the opposite occurs and Uncle gets enough subs to save his channel. By that time, Sumika arrives and wonders what is going on there between Takafumi and his uncle. Afterward, Sumika lectures Uncle about the social decline of middle-aged men in the appropriate workforce and how he, as a YouTuber, isn't financially adequate. On the other hand, Uncle brushes it off, and Sumika mentions that Takafumi isn't able to have a girlfriend live with him due to him living there. Hearing that, Uncle suggests that Sumika live there as well, but Takafumi refuses that suggestion and leaves to do some errands. Once Takafumi is gone, Uncle tries to have a heart-to-heart with Sumika about Takafumi's relationship with her. However, Uncle's comparisons with video game romances don't align with her. Hence, Uncle steps out of the room, and when Sumika tries to apologize to him, Takafumi's aunt appears. Takafumi's aunt looks exactly like Elf, only in Uncle's clothing. She then tries to continue her heart-to-heart with Sumika until Takafumi returns home and outs her as Uncle. After an epiphany, Takafumi suggests they create another YouTube video about Uncle's transformation magic. Although Uncle refuses at first, Takafumi convinces him after promising to play Guardian Heroes with him. After the video was in the process of being uploaded to the internet, they watched a memory of Takafumi's past with Sumiko that reveals their relationship was bittersweet. Once the video was fully uploaded to the internet, they watched it. Although it was a significant success in viewership, Uncle is left despondent how the video didn't include him playing Guardian Heroes and reforms back into his true self. This shocks Sumika as Takafumi cheers about the success of the video they uploaded. Despite Uncle's pride as a YouTuber torn to shreds, a deluxe sushi dinner was enjoyed when the payout from the video was delivered. A flashback of Takafumi shows him being bullied by two students about the fantasy-themed light novel he was reading. Eventually, an even bigger bully appears, who was Sumika. She handles the situation between the bullies, earning Takafumi's respect. This event is shown to Uncle, who, like his Takafumi, was enamored with Sumika on how she handled the situation in her youth. Noting that she became more girly in middle school, Sumika shows the two an old picture of her and Takafumi as evidence. Impressed by it, Uncle takes several pictures of it with his old phone, and Sumika offers to send it to his phone via email. However, Uncle claims that his phone is incapable of accepting emails and calls, which raises the question of how he can contact Takafumi. Sumika then notes how delicious the coffee tastes, and Takafumi reveals that Uncle gave him 10 yen for his birthday, so he purchased a coffee maker. After Sumika comments on how practical giving him 10 yen to Takafumi is, Uncle comments how he didn't know what was appropriate for someone like him in that day and age. For her birthday present to Takafumi, Sumika sends MC a text of a picture of her in a swimsuit from middle school. Immediately, MC asked his phone how to delete the picture since he could be arrested for having an underage picture on his phone. Then, receiving a notification about a sale on coffee beans, MC rushed out of the apartment. Uncle then tells Sumika that her swimsuit picture just lost to some coffee bean ads, followed by an outburst that she is causing Uncle's coffee to spill. He freezes her and the coffee. Startled by this outcome, Uncle uses some fire spells to thaw her out and offers her some towels to use for a shower. While Sumika takes her shower, Uncle steps out for a couple of hours and leaves some of MC's clothes for her to wear as hers dries off. When Sumika is done with her shower, she puts on Takafumi's top, and after this, Takafumi enters the scene. A stare-off between the two occurs, and Sumika then shrieks in embarrassment, causing Takafumi to leave the scene while apologizing. Later, Sumika confronts Takafumi, still wearing just Takafumi's top, and the two have a brief heart-to-heart with each other about Sumika being so responsible. Takafumi then notes that the flag he posted for his uncle was positioned at danger, and immediately, Uncle returns home. Informing his uncle that he saw Sumika in an improper state, Takafumi requests that his uncle erase his memory of it. Before Uncle can do it, Sumika stops him, and the two continue their heart-to-heart moment. Uncle watches, perplexed by the situation, but seeing that bags of coffee are there, he offers to make some more. On Sumika's 20th birthday, Takafumi and she enjoy some beer and snacks. Uncle soon joins them, and Takafumi notes that he was 17 when he was sent to the alternate world and is now 34, but Uncle corrects Takafumi, stating he's 35. Since he doesn't have a proper present for Sumika for her birthday, Uncle gives her words of his philosophy. A pinch is a chance. Uncle goes on to explain the meaning behind the phrase about changing one's perspective on a negative outlook can change a situation for the better. Impressed by the philosophy Uncle imparted to them, he shows them the first time he had alcohol. Takafumi and Sumika were shocked to see how similar he looks in present times and that the memories shown before were of him as a teenager. Elf then appears in the memory wearing a lovely green dress, and Takafumi explains to Sumika that she's Uncle's stalker. As the memory continues, Elf confronts Uncle about the barrier he broke the other day and, as a bribe, offers to buy her some food to keep her mouth shut about said barrier. The elf then changes the subject concerning how strong Uncle is, how he once saved her from a deadly venom dragon, but he brushes it off as hard work and training. They then talk about the blaze dragon that Uncle also slew without the ice sword that was supposed to be necessary to kill it. Showing proof of his achievement, Uncle shows Elf the blaze dragon fire he got as a spoil to Elf, which she claims would be revived if he opened it. Uncle then recites his catchphrase, revealing that he learned from a Puyo Puyo strategy guide. In the present, Takafumi and Sumika are despondent over learning this, and Uncle then goes to play some Puyo Puyo. As the memory continues, Uncle takes a reluctant elf back to his inn, and present-day Uncle interrupts it by asking if Takafumi wants to play with him. Takafumi then has Uncle play Burning Rangers instead and continues to watch the memory as Uncle leads her to his room at the inn. From there, Uncle thanks Elf for taking him back to his room, and the following day, she confronts him and demands to know his plans for that day. Once the memory was over, Sumika takes a drink and forces Uncle to drink too. This causes him to become drunk, and when Sumika tries to bail because of it, Takafumi stops her, and Uncle decides to take her home by a wind spell. The outcome of this makes the three of them fly high in the sky.
The next morning,
In Takafumi's apartment, Sumika suggests that Uncle become a pro baseball player. This gets a tepid response from Takafumi and Uncle, but Sumika claims he can use his magic to pitch super fast balls. However, Uncle claims that in his youth, he was looked down upon by the baseball team in his class, but he still respected them as they earnestly practiced daily. Hence, for him to cheat using magic would be against his morals, as he dedicated himself to playing alien soldier from 6th to 11th grade, which shocks Takafumi and Sumika. Sitting at the table, Uncle mentions to Takafumi and Sumika the dangers of baseball terminology compared to other sports. The two then mention a few examples, and Uncle mentions a time when he was almost assassinated. He then shows the memory in question, where he tiredly wanders through a forest after completing a dungeon. As the memory continues, a person is shown close behind Uncle, who is revealed to be Mabel Rayvale of the Ice Clan. Mabel freezes Uncle's legs in place and tackles him to the ground. Recognizing Mabel, Uncle asks why she's there. Mabel sarcastically answers that she was relieved of her duties because he slew the dragon without using the ice sword to seal him away. Not understanding that she was sarcastic, Uncle notes how happy he was for Mabel, which both Takafumi and Sumika realized off the bat that she was. Although Uncle was at her mercy, Mabel asks why he didn't draw his weapon at her. Uncle answers that he knows she has no intention to kill him. He then asks her if she's been eating properly, causing Mabel to whimper and cry and pass out on Uncle's lap. Uncle then drags Mabel to his room at an inn and places her on his bed. After Mabel wakes up, he gives her a loaf of bread and asks why she didn't become a hermit in her village. Mabel answers that her tree home was cut down for firewood and that she was given an ultimatum of either becoming the village pet or leaving to make it out on her own. So Mabel froze all of the villagers' feet, dripped icy cold water on their necks, and then fled. Shocked by Mabel's tenacity, he asks Mabel if she really doesn't like working, which she mentions a few possible work interests of hers, but denotes that they're all too labor-demanding. Relating to Mabel's predicament, but notes that he makes his living as an adventurer. Complimenting Uncle's gumption in how he makes his living, Uncle then tells Mabel about how he beat Alien Soldier on super hard mode in under 30 minutes. Uncle suggests that Mabel make a living as an adventurer using the ice sword. Despite her hesitance in doing so, Uncle coaxes Mabel to do it, claiming it's her life and she should choose how to live it. Elated by the suggestion, Mabel claims she'd still need to break the seal on the sword, which is linked to her heart, but believes that becoming an adventurer would fix her gloomy personality. He then claims there's nothing wrong with being an introvert. Suddenly, the ice sword starts to crack and breaks. Subsequently, he points out the ring he gave Mabel as she slept on his bed, which causes a misunderstanding between the two, where he clarifies how he thought she would sell the ring to be able to live an easy life. Because of Mabel's fury, the ice sword refreezes, and Mabel tries to attack Uncle, forcing him to restrain her to the ground. Elf then appears in the room and witnesses Uncle holding Mabel in an awkward position, leading her to believe he was trying to take advantage of her. Elf quickly comes to release Mabel from bindings, and she then freezes him and bonds with Elf. Back to the present, Takafumi mentions how impressive it was for Uncle to beat the game in under 30 minutes. Uncle then starts to brag, but becomes notified when Takafumi learns from the internet that someone else beat it in less than 12 minutes. A little later, Uncle asks Takafumi about region-coded games, and Takafumi gives him an explanation about it. Sumika, however, continues watching the memory, revealing people of the Ice Clan share the blood of those from another world. They all then continue watching the memory, where Elf talks about how Uncle nearly traumatized Mabel by entrapping her into marriage. However, Mabel brushes it off and explains the history of the Ice Clan's founding when a samurai from an alternate world was sent there 400 years ago. The samurai asked the god who reincarnated it to give him a sword capable of slaying it, which amused the god. However, Elf already knew the rest of the story as she read it from a book in a library. Because Elf ruined her story, Mabel began crying, and Elf consoled her. Frustrated that he never met God, he wasn't given a god-slaying sword, and any special bonuses for reincarnating into that world. Takafumi suggests that Uncle rewind his memory to 18 years prior when he was sent to the alternate world. After pursuing his memories, they watch a memory where Uncle is resurrected into the alternate world and is sequentially beaten for being mistaken for an orc variant by a trio of men. As the men beat up Uncle, Sumika hears a voice interpreted as God, and Takafumi uses his translation app to translate what God was saying. God said it would grant him an ability of his choice, and Uncle, at that time, wanted to be able to understand and communicate with the people of that world. Although Uncle was now capable of speaking their language, he was captured and sold to a freak show for 3 bronze coins. Before Uncle continued the memory, Takafumi suggested they take a coffee break, and they all enjoyed some coffee. A memory shows where Uncle was appraised for 3 bronze coins by a slave trader. After being caught by the 3 men he approached when he first arrived in the alternate world, the 3 men selling Uncle tried to bargain with the slave trader to raise the price. On the other hand, the slave trader refuses, and when one of the men tries to sell a scouring pad, it sells for 120 bronze coins. This revelation shocks both Takafumi and Sumika about how dirt cheap Uncle was considered compared to an everyday item. Watching this memory, Uncle and Takafumi get synchronized nosebleeds. It's then revealed that Uncle used a memory wiping spell on himself after the experience, and Takafumi after reading about it in his uncle's diary. Uncle then has Sumika read the first page of his diary and reveals that after he received his memory erasing spell, he immediately used it to erase his horrible experience. Takafumi notes that erased memories can return, and Uncle claims their nosebleed is a warning from the spirit of memory. The memory continues. Uncle was locked away in a prison and forgotten by the slave trader for about a week, and he managed to survive on rainwater. To keep himself sane, Uncle talked to a ray of moonlight that shone through a crack in the ceiling about a Sega game called Pulseman. Eventually, Uncle learns that the ray of light he was talking with was the spirit of light Collide, which grants him his first spell, a Sword of Light. He uses it to escape his imprisonment, and both Takafumi and Sumika realize that Uncle used his language translation ability to communicate with the spirits. It would explain how Uncle briskly repaired the barrier he broke in the city that the monsters would invade. As the memory continues, Uncle releases the other captive monsters there, only for them all to turn feral and attack both him and the slave trader. Not wanting to live his life as an ordinary commoner, Uncle uses his newly acquired light magic to save the slave trader and himself. Although the slave trader was initially thankful, he became terrified by the bloody and crazed-looking Uncle, who then used his magic to transfer him to a safe location. Throughout the night, Uncle slew all the monsters, barbecued and ate them by morning. He notes that the start of his 17-year tenure in the other world was pretty good. Hearing this shocks both of them. Sumika then tries to leave because of how it was getting late. However, right then, Uncle mentions how bad it got from there on out, revealing the time when he saved the elf girl from a dragon, which gets both of their attention. Sumika calls to cancel her fried chicken dinner. Uncle then shows his memory of saving Elf from a venom dragon. However, she becomes sad by how he super fast defeated it right after arriving. He explains that he merely attacked the most vulnerable spot created by Elf's attacks. As the memory continues, he gives Elf his hoodie, which escalates into an explicit misunderstanding between them. That interaction with the elf girl would mark the troubled relationship he had with her. And he gets a couple of troubling times he had with her, including when he was frozen in ice. Sumika then curiously asks what happened after that night. So Uncle shows it, revealing both Elf and Mabel stayed in bed with him during the night. After Uncle and Elf have a moment together, it's ruined by Mabel, who cries for her mother in her sleep about not wanting to work. Elf then wakes her up with a single karate chop, and a flustered Mabel tries to explain her sleep talk concerning not wanting to work. Uncle then reminds her that she can sell the ring he gave her for a hefty sum, but Mabel is hesitant to do it as she's inexperienced with bartering. Hence, Elf offers to sell it in her place, but Uncle suggests that Elf take care of Mabel, and she believes it means becoming Elf's pet dog. Afterward, they all eat breakfast together, and Mabel formally introduces herself to Elf and Uncle. Elf then introduces herself as simply Elf and her mission to collect ancient relics. Uncle introduces himself as Wolf Gumblood, a person from another country trying to make his way back to his home country. Once the introduction formalities were over, Elf announced that she'd be heading back to Ikozan, and Uncle mentioned why she'd return to the place where she sold her ring at. Takafumi and Sumika note that Elf wants to buy back her ring. Mabel then asks what Uncle will be doing, and he claims he'll try and clear a nearby dungeon a hero was trying to clear, when Mabel offers to help him. However, Mabel's nap time intervenes with Uncle's patience, and he goes to complete the dungeon by himself. Noticing how late it was, Uncle states they should end it there, and Sumika laments about not going out for fried chicken with her friends. So Uncle treats her and Takafumi to some ramen. Elf, wearing Uncle's hoodie, wakes up in her bed and, with her feet, fetches her necklace. Uncle then enters the scene and asks for his hoodie back, but she refuses as he gives it to her, so now it belongs to her. Hence, Uncle magically restrains Elf and tries to take his hoodie off of her, but cannot entirely do it due to the cuffs around her wrists. Elf then suggests that Uncle undo the spell to make it easier on himself, and when he does it, Elf knocks him unconscious. Feeling remorseful for what she did, Elf patched up Uncle and left him in his room. In the present, Uncle and Takafumi watch the memory, and Uncle mentions how messed up what Elf did to him was, and Takafumi simply agrees with him. Internally, however, Takafumi thought that his uncle should have simply let her have the hoodie. We'll continue the next part in next few weeks. Meanwhile, subscribe and watch our other contents posted in our channel. Until then, stay safe. Bye.